The vibration of change, that magical place where life shifts from struggle to ease, from stagnation to forward movement, from old ways of being to new ways of becoming. Yes, it can seem rather elusive to get there, but when you are in it, you feel it down to your very core, and it can positively affect everything in your life, from your relationships to your health and well-being, from your career path to your abundance, from the quality of your inner connection to the fullness of your self-expression. Here on the Christine Upchurch Show, we explore ways to get into that vibration of change with experts in the fields of consciousness, psychology, spirituality, health, healing, and science. Are you ready to step into your vibration of change? Speaking of darkness, when we don't know when we're going to see the sun again, I think that we are experiencing a deep shadow in humanity right now. Um, Over the last year and a half or so, our world has changed dramatically. And it's interesting because they're almost two different perspectives about what's going on. And there's a particular narrative that we see in the mainstream media that says one thing. But when you start to dig a little deeper, you see that there's a whole other narrative underway. And, regardless of what you believe, regardless of what you see as truth, what you identify as falsehoods, one of the things that's really clear to me right now is that we are experiencing a dreary reign of the collective. We're experiencing the shadow side of the collective. We're beginning to question what's true, what's not, what's the real motivation. One of the things I've experienced over the years as I've gotten to be more clear about my own vibration, and as I got into the healing realm and started tuning in energetically, is sometimes what we experience with an individual is they look right on paper, they seem right, they smile, you interact with them, and it's almost like, oh my gosh, I should really trust this person, I should really like this person. But if you're discerning about the energy, you realize there's a whole other level of what's going on. It might be manipulation, it might be control, it might be ego, wanting to boost themselves up. I think what happens in the consciousness realm sometimes is there's some fabulous teachers, there's some fabulous leaders, don't get me wrong, but there are some who are very ego-based. And at first they lure you in with I think of the cotton candy fluff of spirituality, the feel-good stuff. And they might have some very valid things to say. And you might view some of what they say as truth. And yet, as you tune into their vibration, as you follow them along down their narrative, down the timeline of, what they're expressing and what you're experiencing based on your interaction with them, you may begin to identify what I called a split vibration, a divided vibration, wherein they're presenting one way, but we sense something very different is going on. And so there's this conflict. And the more discerning we get with our own vibration, with the clarity of our boundaries, with the clarity of interpreting the energy around us, we begin to perceive that divided vibration more and more. And from my perspective, in terms of our individual conscious journey, that is a part of waking up. That's an important part of waking up. And it's not just about discerning the shadow side in others. It's also being very aware of the shadow side within. So for instance, years ago, I would begin to notice the multiple layers of my own energetic vibration and intention. For instance, somebody said, oh, well, I tried this healer and didn't like them and I'm drawn to you. And part of me would be like, oh, good. I hope that, I can prove that, I'm valid. Another part of me was like, whatever, however it works out, it's all up to the universe. Another part of me would, have this like little sense of competition. It might be just momentary like that, but it was the kind of thing where I begin to discern that I had multiple layers of vibration, of intention, of psychology, where and I began to get very discerning with myself, like, oh, there's my ego there. Oh, there's my sense of not feeling worthy and wanting to prove my worthiness. And oh, there's my connection to the divine that wants to show up and serve. And so as I began to get more and more clarity about my own divided vibration, it allowed me to see more of my woundedness, to clear out some of my ego stuff, to kind of like, you know, share within my own consciousness. Well, there's this piece, there's this piece, there's this piece. And to be okay with that and observe it. And then to start to clear out aspects of it that weren't in that soul path. And it's not like it's all cleared out, obviously it's a lifelong journey and probably many lives of journeys. But it's the kind of thing where when we begin to discern our own divided vibration, we begin to become more sensitive to others' divided vibrations. And so, for instance, in what's going on right now in our world, there are very different perspectives about what's really underway with this thing that people are putting into their arm. And without getting into my perspective on that per se, what I think I want to invite you to do is to look at your own divided vibration. For instance, if you feel like something is in alignment with truth, something's in alignment with the collective benefit, are you finding yourself feeling holier than thou and judging somebody else about their perspective? I mean, if so, that's absolutely a divided vibration. Um, if you feel like you need to wake somebody else up because they've got their blinders on. I mean, it's one thing to serve and to speak your truth, but it's a whole other thing to have attachment to controlling somebody else's conscious journey. And so as we become more and more aware of our own divided vibration, of our own ego being disguised as soul, um, it allows us to look at our own woundedness. Like, are we afraid of being wrong? Are we afraid of not being worthy if we don't show up in a particular way and show that we care about humanity, or we care about our community, or we care about our family or our friends? Um, that Having that clarity about the different layers of how we feel, who we are, and how we're expressing ourselves is a really important thing to be able to discern. Um, because that without the clarity about the different pieces, and trust me, folks, there we have the various pieces to our psyche, to our expression of self in human form, which partly is soul, partly is ego, partly is our physicality, partly is the conditioning within our culture, within our family, within our tribe. Um, until we can discern the different pieces, we can't have clarity of what the soul is telling us to do. We can't have clarity of soul expressing itself through us. And it doesn't mean that the soul isn't ever expressing itself if we don't have that clarity, but that clarity allows us to say, okay, well, there's this piece that is judging that they're wrong and I'm right. And that part isn't serving. And we can just be aware of it. And it's like, okay, we may be right, in fact, in the 3D realm. Um, but that judgment isn't serving. So if we can have that clarity and sort of see the different pieces and say, okay, well, here's a soul piece. And these other pieces I'm going to observe, be aware of, and not give too much power to, or not try to give too much opportunity to express itself, and have that clarity of, this is soul, this is what I want to express, on a soul level while in human form, within the context of this shadow that we're facing, this shadow that we are moving through, this collective shadow, the drizzly rain instead of the sunshine of our collective expression. So I want to encourage you to, get to be as discerning as possible, get to be as aware as possible about your own divided vibration, about the various aspects of yourself expressing themselves through your human experience. Because as we get clarity, we can decide what to give power to, what to give expression to, because ultimately, I think that each of us yearns to express our soul, express source through our human experience as much as possible. So if we can become more discerning, we see what needs to be healed, we give power to that which really needs to have the power to get us through this collective shadow. And, for some of you, you may think that the collective shadow is the external events of illness, of health. And for some of you, you may view the collective shadow as the control, the judgment. Um, I saw a great quote today by Noam Chomsky. Um, and, it was something along the lines of, you may view history as remembering that 6 million Jews were killed. But really what history should be teaching us is what led all those Germans to implement that. It's not the exact quote, but that was the whole concept. So within the context of the health situation, we're seeing a lot of control, and we're seeing a lot of judgment. We're seeing a lot of bad behavior of both people who have some power, as well as people who think they're showing up and expressing soul, but being very judgmental, allowing their shadow side to come out, and seeing some violence within the context of people speaking their truth. So anyway, it's a really important time now for us to have some awareness, have some detachment, and to be very discerning of not only what's going on within ourselves, to discern what's shadow, what's soul, and what we're going to give power to. I think it's very helpful to have that same kind of detachment and to look out on the world at the events without, buying into any narrative, but to see the behavior, to see the shadow side appearing in a variety of ways, so that we can be discerning about what's really good for the collective and what's really the shadow side for us to navigate our way through. Anyway, that's just some of my thoughts about what's going on. And I try to stay as high level as possible, not just to get some of the concepts across, but because we have to be very careful in these days of censorship to talk about anything specific. Because as I know from personal experience, the show can get censored, get kicked off of YouTube. My AM station, my beloved AM station, 1150 AM in Seattle, can get penalized if I say the wrong things, which is a very sad state of the collective shadow. So it's the modern version of book burning. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you'd like to empower yourself to step further into your vibration of change, please visit my website at christineupchurch.com, where you can learn more about my insights, upcoming events, and private sessions.